everyone. I'm Melissa McAllister.
And I'm Dr. Lauren Fitzgerald, and you're listening to the Made Fitz Show.
So for years, we have dedicated ourselves to giving others the tools to feel their absolute best through the power of health, fitness, and nutrition coaching, as well as both Western and functional medicine.
Each week on the Made Fitz Show, we're going to talk about everything from health trends, nutrition, topics like HRT and medical weight loss, self-care, wellness hacks, different workouts, fasting, our favorite recipes, and more.
We promise that the Made Fitz Show will be educational, entertaining, but most importantly, worth listening to each week. Now, with small, dedicated changes, you can live a healthier, more heart-filled life. We're excited to show you it's possible with the right strategies that are simple to adopt.
We are a certified nutritionist and a board-certified medical doctor who have a combination of over 50 years in the health and fitness world and are passionate about empowering others to take the leap and live their healthiest, happiest lives by using the tools we give in this podcast.
Hey everybody, it's Dr. Lauren Fitz, and today's episode is all about Ozempic, Wegovy, Semaglutide, Mounjaro, Zepbound, Tirzepatide. This class of drugs that is a hot topic and has been for the last few years of incretins. This is a class of peptides that our body naturally makes, and they have been basically made synthetically to mimic a hormone that our body naturally makes in our GI tract. Now, the purpose of today's episode is literally to have something that's easily shareable to loved ones that may or may not be using this class of drugs in the correct way. I decided to make this episode because so many of my patients that I see at Larimar Med are weight loss patients that I use semaglutide as one of the many tools that I give them to help them reach their ideal body weight. I believe that my weight loss program does it correctly, but unfortunately, I would say probably 95% of providers that are prescribing these weight loss drugs that are so popular are doing it the incorrect way and are setting people up for basically long-term reliance on this peptide to maintain the weight loss. So at the beginning of my consultation with a new weight loss patient, I will always, first of all, let them understand that I want them to know that this is a powerful peptide that can be the most powerful tool in their weight loss journey to help them reach their ideal body weight, maybe for the first time in their life. And I also want them to understand that I don't want them to necessarily think that they for sure will need to be on it forever to maintain that ideal body weight, right? When I found that all of these years of practicing medicine and being a fitness professional, if I can help the patient understand the why behind what I'm doing, more times than not, they're most likely to stick to the prescription, the doctor's orders that I give them so that they stick to it and for the right reason. Because if you understand the why behind what I'm doing, more likely you're going to stick to it. So when I talk to a weight loss patient, I always let them understand the importance of muscle mass. I will let them know that my non-negotiables that I require for them to do, that I ask of them every single month when I talk to them, and I speak to my patients every 4 weeks. It's a quick 15-minute appointment, but it's a check-in. We talk about how much weight they've lost. We talk about the dose. We talk about, are you doing all of these non-negotiables? And if they aren't, that's their part of the bargain. And I will stop prescribing semaglutide to a patient or tirzepatide. But the fact is that I want them to do it the correct way. And I don't want them to do it the way in which I see it done by most of these overnight weight loss clinics that are just basically prescribing this drug and given no guidance, and patients are losing weight really fast. And so the first thing that I talk about is setting realistic goals and expectations, because fast weight loss, as great as it sounds, is not the goal. Fast weight loss typically means that fast weight loss, when a patient is using a drug like Ozempic, Wegovy, Semaglutide, those are all essentially the same compound. Two are generic, or two are brand names, two are generic names. Well, Semaglutide, different pronunciation, right? But that's the generic versus the Ozempic is a brand name for FDA approved for type 2 diabetes. Wegovy, same thing, brand name FDA approved for weight loss. So for patients with BMI over 30. And we will talk about, I'll probably end up doing a part 1 and part 2 of this episode because there's so much to cover. But I want to, first of all, make this first part 1 something that's easily shareable so that maybe you're on it by another provider and you're like, I just want to know how to do it right. I can't afford to work with you, Dr. Fitz, but I have the opportunity to do this. I want to do it right. And so this episode you should save it, share it, all of the kind of good things, right? So when we start talking about the goals of weight loss should be realistically set. So 1 to 2 pounds of weight loss per week is a realistic goal. It's slow and steady. And it's so funny because, because I meet with my patients every 4 weeks, oftentimes I will always ask them, they always know, how many pounds have you lost in the last 4 weeks versus how many pounds have you lost in total weeks injection? So let's say that they're at their 3rd follow-up and they have had 12 weeks worth of injections. I will ask them, okay, in the last 4 weeks, how many pounds have you lost? And if they tell me something like, well, I think it's not working anymore, I think I need to go up in dose, it's only been 1 or 2 pounds. And then I'll ask, okay, but how many weeks total injections have you had and how many pounds total have you lost? And they'll be like, well, I just took my 12th injection and I'm down 16 pounds. I'll be like, okay, you're still above the average of about 1 pound of weight loss per week that the goal is that I set with patients. And so oftentimes the reality is we need the reality check with the provider to let them understand, like, slow and steady really does win the race when it comes to this. Because I mean, we all know those people that got on this peptide, whether it be semaglutide or tirzepatide, and lost weight very quickly. And I'll tell you what's happening with those patients. Basically, whoever the prescriber is prescribing it without really talking to the patient on a regular basis. They are just saying, month 1, you do this dose, month 2, you do this dose, month 3, you do this dose. And they go up to really high doses, despite how bad symptoms are, despite everything, right? So what's happening is it's essentially medically induced anorexia, which that means that it's basically what we call iatrogenic. So it's the doctor is prescribing a drug, it's prescribed, but it's basically prescribed in the wrong manner because this patient is taking too much of it and not being advised properly on what they need to do to make sure that the weight loss doesn't happen too fast, because we have to eat. And all of these patients that are being prescribed this without any guidance on the journey are basically, the appetite suppression is so vast, and they're not being told, hey, not only do you have to eat, but you have to eat protein, because what we want to prevent is losing your muscle. So, we all know those people that, I know Susie who lost 30 pounds in 2 months. Okay, that's way too fast. And I can tell you exactly what happened to Susie. Susie got on a high dose. She probably barely ate anything at all because she was so nauseated and sick every time she ate, because she was on too high of a dose, and she lost weight very fast. And in theory, that sounds great. That sounds perfect, amazing, right? But the fact is, when you lose weight that fast, you are definitely losing both fat and muscle. And sometimes the percent of muscle to fat is like almost 50%. Now, any weight loss regimen that works because of decrease in calories, you're going to have an element of weight loss that comes from muscle mass loss. Okay, so whether they're on semaglutide or tirzepatide, Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, Mounjaro, it doesn't matter. Even if you do just the traditional, like I cut back calories and I exercise and blah, 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 there is an expected amount of muscle mass loss, especially if you are not focusing on 2 of my non-negotiables. So 2 of the non-negotiables have everything to do with muscle mass. And I'm sure if you follow me online, you're not surprised by this at all. I share it on a regular basis. I live by example. If you don't know my own history, I actually was on semaglutide from October 2022 to April 2023. I did it the proper way. I weaned myself off of it in hopes that I could show that you can do it. It is possible, but also knowing that if I started to gain weight back once I got off of semaglutide, that I was fully willing to get back on it, because I was not about to go back to the 25 30-pound plus heavier version of myself. Okay. That being said, I have not taken semaglutide since April of 2023. We're now in March of 2024, and I've maintained my body composition verified by DEXA scan every 3 to 4 months, based on doing all of the things and keeping my muscle mass, right? So muscle mass is super important. And if you happen to be a female, which a lot of our listeners are female, the rate of muscle mass loss per decade once you hit your 40s, it's pretty alarming. And so it's completely preventable. But if you don't understand that while you're in your 20s and 30s, you have to work really hard to gain the muscle. And then in your 40s and 50s, you got to make sure that you don't lose it. And the only way you don't lose it is if you use it and you eat protein. And so that's why those are two of my required elements, my non-negotiables that I make my patients do and check in with me every single month. So if you are a patient that you have never lifted weights before in your life, I would tell you start off at 3 days a week of at least doing resistance training, 30 minutes, no more than about 60 minutes. Ideally, you should hire a personal trainer. Okay. Because ultimately I want to make sure that you are learning how to do resistance training with proper form so you don't injure yourself. Okay. Because injury will definitely set you back, and then you'll only be able to get walking, get your steps in until you recover from your injury. So I highly recommend getting a personal trainer. And this is where, just a caveat, a lot of the people that are throwing hate towards people using this, whether they're overweight, obese, or morbidly obese, a lot of the hate is coming from a lot of people like personal trainers that are ultimately, I think, threatened by this class of peptides. And I highly encourage you to change your mindset if you happen to be one of those personal trainers that you're like totally against it, because this peptide is probably the most revolutionary, life-changing peptide that we have seen in our generation. It's helping so many people. So you can either embrace that and join along, because all of these people need your help. So embrace it and recognize that it's a tool, no different than any supplement that you've taken in the past. But actually, I would say it's different because it works way better than most of your over-the-counter supplements that you have personally probably sold to online people or clients. That being said, I'm not against tools. I mean, I'm drinking my morning coffee right now, which caffeine is a supplement that is highly studied and definitely well established in the literature as a great supplement, if you will. And it tastes good, right? So that being said, muscle mass is your muscle. It's your organ of longevity, which means that not only do you care about maintaining muscle, if not gaining muscle, during your weight loss journey with a provider like myself, which, by the way, if you would like to become my patient, you need to email us at info@larimarmed. That's info@LARIMARMED.com, and just ask, hey, I want more information on your weight loss program. There are certain states that I can't take you on if you want to be my patient as a weight loss patient. But there's very few people that wouldn't benefit from this. And I'm a believer, I would rather tackle your weight when you're 10 to 20 pounds overweight versus waiting until you're 50 pounds overweight. So this is my own personal opinion based on 2 years of using this in my patients. And I've got well over 1,000 patients that I've used it in. I believe that it is a powerful tool, especially when used the proper way. So anyway, getting back to what I was saying. So the non-negotiables, the resistance training. If you are brand new to resistance training, I highly, highly, highly recommend hiring a personal trainer initially. And I always tell my patients, look, you don't have to commit to a whole year of working out with these people. Let them know, say, hey, I want to hire you for maybe a month or two to train 3 days a week, and teach me how to lift weights with proper form, and give me a routine that I can follow. And based on your budget, it will be depending on how many times you can actually work with them. But when you work with another person, they're going to push you harder, and they're going to make sure that you're doing proper form so that you don't injure yourself. Okay. But resistance training is key. And I don't care how old you are. At this moment, when I'm recording this, my mom is about to turn 69 in a few days. And she literally just started lifting weights last year. She was just celebrating her 1-year anniversary of working out with a personal trainer. And she has watched me and my dad lift weights literally for decades. And she's always just been a walker. And I got her into yoga a couple of years ago, and then finally insisted that she started resistance training because I recognize that as she gets older, the muscle mass is super important for her quality of life. I don't want her to be one of those old, feeble ladies that can't do basic activities of life. I want her to thrive. And so my mom and my dad both work out with her personal trainers twice a week, every single week. I highly recommend, I wouldn't recommend anything that I haven't done with myself or with family members. So if hiring a personal trainer is not in your budget, there are some great apps like Beachbody On Demand, the Body app, Peloton. I've never done any of the Peloton apps, but I hear that they've got some good options as well. But honestly, if you are brand new to lifting weights, the best thing to do is to find a personal trainer that will work with you on this journey, knowing that you're using a tool like an incretin to help aid in your weight loss, and understanding that you want to try and set yourself up so that you don't need this incretin the rest of your life. And you know that the only way that that's going to be possible is if you work on your muscle mass. So the second part of my non-negotiable has everything to do with giving your body the building blocks so that you can maintain and or build muscle. Okay. And I say and or because once we women start to go through perimenopause, our testosterone is one of the hormones that drops. So it's definitely a lot harder if you are at perimenopause age and your testosterone is in the crapper and you're not replacing it with hormone replacement therapy. It's definitely a lot harder to build muscle. Okay. But that will be saved for another episode when I talk about the hormones of perimenopause that start to go down. So building blocks, your building blocks is your protein. And I will tell you that I started being protein centric with my functional medicine patients, even before I was using semaglutide with my weight loss patients, because I understood that most people that think that they are eating high protein are actually not. So if you're someone that's listening to this and you're like, yeah, I think I eat high protein, I just challenge you to take 2 or 3 days to actually measure out your food and track it on an app like MyFitnessPal or Fat Secret or Chronometer. There's plenty of apps that are free out there that will literally, if you're having, 8 ounces of chicken, you put it on the scale, you weigh it, you type in, chicken thighs, 8 ounces, and it will tell you, oh, that is 43 grams of protein, right? And so you type in 43 grams of protein. And ultimately at the end of the day, your goal of total protein should be your goal weight. So if you're a female and your goal weight is 120 pounds, then you need to be eating 120 grams of protein in a day. And I'm telling you right now, after years of experience with patients, so many patients think that they're eating adequate protein and they are not. So I will just challenge you to track it for 3 days so that you can see how close you are coming to eating your protein goal. I would say, I always tell my patients that are using semaglutide or tirzepatide, you have to eat 3 meals and they need to be roughly about 5 hours apart. Now, there is not a magic number of 5 hours versus 4 versus 6, but one of the mechanisms of action of this class of peptides is that it slows down how food travels through your GI tract. So your GI tract is a long tube from your mouth to your anus, right? And it slows down that travel time. So let's say that, without semaglutide, it would take about 24 hours to go from your mouth to, out your pooper. With semaglutide, it's going to slow it down. It's going to be over 24 hours, right? But it doesn't stop it. And we'll talk about stuff like gastroparesis or stomach paralysis probably in part 2, because I do think that there's a lot of these fear-mongering trigger words that get people to, clickbait, that I just want to tell you my own personal experience, because I've had 0 patients have any of the bad complications. I'm going to knock on wood. I'm knocking on my head for those people not watching the YouTube channel. And I will also knock on this wood. But I've had 0 patients with any of the complications like gastroparesis, stomach paralysis, pancreatitis, intractable nausea, vomiting. And it's because I have these non-negotiables in place, like you have to eat, you can't skip meals. Okay. And so knowing that I've given every single patient a protein goal, I tell them to divide it. So if your protein goal is 120 grams of protein, then 120 divided by 3 is 40 grams. So you eat around your protein-centric meal of 40 grams. So that can look like, for example, a protein shake that you have 10 ounces of water and you scoop scoops of a good quality grass-fed whey that has no other ingredients in it, but has a total of 40 grams of protein, so 20 per scoop, and you push that little button and you blend it up and you drink it. It can be something as simple as that, or it can be, good whole, like, honestly, it's really hard to get your total grams of protein if you're plant-based. So I'm not even going to waste my time on those of you that are vegans and whatnot. It's next to impossible to get adequate protein when you're only eating plant-based proteins. I'm not against using some plant-based, but I'm all for animal meat and dairy for your animal protein. You can do, Greek yogurt and cottage cheese. And when I go to the grocery store, I look for my grass-fed options. Sometimes they don't have grass-fed options. And so, I will choose the best option at whatever grocery store that I'm at, but I will literally go and look at the serving size and how many grams of protein per serving size. So typically, for example, Greek yogurt the serving size is 3/4 of a cup. So the protein the Greek yogurt that I have in my refrigerator right now, I think it's Stony Brook's grass fed, and 3/4 of a cup gives me 16 grams of protein, right? And so the cottage cheese is typically the serving size for most cottage cheese is about 1/2 a cup. So my cottage cheese is 14 grams. So if I do a serving of Greek yogurt and a serving of cottage cheese, so 3/4 of a cup of Greek yogurt, 1/2 of a cup of cottage cheese, that gives me 30 grams of protein. And so if my goal is to eat 40 grams every meal, I need to come up with 10 more grams of protein. So I might scoop a little bit of my protein powder on top, or maybe have, some, I don't know. I mean, there's multiple ways that I can get that protein number up to 40 grams, right? And then of course, good old meat. I mean, red meat, you've got grass-fed beef, you've got lamb, you've got venison, you've got bison, all great sources of wild game red meat that I eat on a regular basis. You've got fish, at this time that I'm recording, I'm snowbirding in Florida. So I regularly go and get fresh caught fish and shellfish. Then poultry is probably my least favorite, but if I do chickens, I'll do some chicken thighs and get that. But there's multiple ways to get your animal protein, but knowing how much of whatever protein you're getting gives you that end goal of your protein, right? And if you're like, man, Dr. Fitz, I really struggle. I can't get 40 grams. I'm just too full by the end of my meal eating the 40 grams of protein. Then divide it into 3 meals and 1 snack that you basically top off your protein. So maybe you find yourself at the end of the day, you've only hit 100 grams of protein. Get that protein powder out and blend it with 8 ounces of water so you can top off that last 20 grams and drink it, a couple hours before you go to bed. Typically, I like to advise 3 hours before you go to bed so that there's no chance of acid reflux or indigestion. Because again, if we've slowed down the transient time of the food when it goes into your mouth and out the butthole, I just like that word. Sorry, I digress. If it's sitting in your stomach longer than it typically does, if you eat and then go to bed, you're most likely going to experience some heartburn when using incretins like semaglutide or tirzepatide. Okay. So let's recap real fast. If you are someone taking this on your weight loss journey and you're like, I need to lose weight because I know it's going to improve all of my health measures. It's going to improve quality of life, my mental health, everything, but I want to do it the right way. And I really don't want to have to rely on this the rest of my life. Then this is the one and only way to do it. There's no other quick fix or shortcut, like literally. And that's what I always tell my patients that. So when I meet with them every 4 weeks, right? And when they tell me that they have a month where their weight loss has slowed down, it's below that 4 pounds. Because remember, 1 to 2 pounds on average per week is the goal. So I'm looking for 4 to 8 pound weight loss in 1 month. And I typically like to have it closer to 4 versus 8 pounds, right? Because 2 pounds per week is almost getting too fast. And that's where you're really going to see the Ozempic face, the saggy skin, the Ozempic butt, all of that kind of, stuff that are clickbaits online. But if they haven't lost at least 4 pounds, I will ask them, how's your weight training going? How many times on average have you lifted weights? How good are you at hitting your minimum protein goal? And then I ask them about steps, and we'll talk about steps here in a bit. But if they haven't done all of these, then I will remind them, look, this is a powerful tool. It's not a magic tool, and you want to do it correctly. And the whole purpose of using this as a tool, hopefully a temporary tool, is to understand that while you're using semaglutide, you are retraining your brain with getting out all of the bad habits that got you to carry this extra weight and replacing it with these new healthy habits and lifestyle. These are not just things that you're going to do while on the semaglutide diet. These are going to be your forever. So you're going to forever know that, hey, if my ideal body weight is 120 pounds, I need to eat 120 grams protein every day. And that just becomes your norm, right? So it becomes easier as you adjust your thinking and your lifestyle to understand that you have to eat the protein first. And I will tell some patients initially, when the appetite suppression is so severe, you might only be able to eat the protein, and the sides, the veggies literally can't, you don't have no room for them. And that's okay. It won't always stay that severe, but you have to eat your protein. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You cannot skip meals. You have to eat at least 3 times a day so that you can get that protein in. And man, make sure that first meal of the day, that first, breakfast, whatever time it is adequate protein. Okay. I'm telling you right now, the amount of people that I have seen over the years that are like, yeah, I eat a high protein breakfast. Then I ask them, and they literally have an egg. An egg has 6 grams of protein, guys. That's not a high protein breakfast. Okay. My breakfast this morning, I had 3 eggs and 3 sausages, totaling 43 grams of protein. Okay. I typically will put some sauerkraut on it so I get some good probiotics and fiber. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but I know how much protein I need to eat first thing in the morning, and I know how important that is. Okay. So now let's talk about the third non-negotiable. We've talked about 2 of my 5 non-negotiables that I have my weight loss patients do and check in every single month. We've got the weight resistance, or the resistance training, the weight training. And the amount of days is different for everyone. And this is where I would love to essentially team up with personal trainers. Like, I would love to find someone like the Mind Pump guys that could work with physicians like me, because they have great workout programs, but something that is tailored for, the beginner versus the intermediate patient versus someone advanced like me, who's been lifting weights literally, since I was 16, right? But having, the weight training, how many days a week and what program, that'll be dependent on the individual patient. The protein goal will literally be dependent on what your ideal body weight is. And one thing I didn't mention is the ideal body weight. It's your gender is definitely dependent, and your biological gender. And I'm not going to talk about it any more than that. If you're a female and you're 5'5", then your ideal body weight is a certain range, versus if you're a male and you're, 6 feet tall, your ideal body range is a totally different and higher range. Right. And it also depends on, what kind of body type you have. If you're an ectomorph, like the super skinny kind, versus someone that's an endomorph, which is more curvy, you're going to be on the higher end versus the lower end of the ideal body weight. But roughly, finding out your ideal body weight has to do with your gender and your height. Okay. That being said, the third non-negotiable is your NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And I believe out of all of the non-negotiables, this is probably the most important. We'll talk about nutrition in a bit, because what you eat, the amount of protein definitely important, but also quality of food is important as well. And I'll talk about that in part 2. But the non-exercise activity thermogenesis, you're walking. I'm telling you right now, this is one of the main things that I did different when I was on semaglutide. The 2 major things that I did different when I was on semaglutide, I learned how much I actually need to eat. I thought that because I was eating really high quality, healthy, whole foods, that it really didn't matter, but calories do matter, unfortunately. And this has been one example of the many transitions of my thought process and beliefs as a physician and a fitness professional, that I used to, there was a period where I really thought that calories actually did not count at all. And it was all about what the food does affecting your hormones. And while that is important, because 100 calories of broccoli is different than 100 calories of Oreos in your body, calories still do matter. And unfortunately, a lot of people on semaglutide are just eating less calories of crap fake foods like Oreos. Okay. So the quality food, definitely important, but quantity food is also still important as well. That being said, when I was on semaglutide, that was the first time that I actually started tracking data like my step count. And while I was on semaglutide, this was before I got my walking pad, I was getting at least 15,000 steps every single day. The best way to build up to that is divide your walk into 3 times a day. Walking after your meal is great for your blood sugar, whether you are pre-diabetic, insulin resistant, or not at all, and you're metabolically healthy. Like, that's a good habit that a lot of different cultures already have. So figuring out, get your iWatch or your Fitbit or whatever tracks your steps, and walk at the pace that you feel like you're probably going to walk that's comfortable to you, and track how many minutes does it take for you to hit, let's say 3,000 steps? Because maybe you're just starting off like, let me just start off at 10,000 steps, Lauren. Okay, cool. So if you can figure out that it takes you 20 minutes to walk 3,000 steps, then now you know that you need to do 3 20-minute walks after breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that will give you at least 9,000 steps. And that way the other 1,000 comes and goes with all of the other activities of your daily life, right? And obviously, every time I meet with my patients, I will up that ante just a bit and be like, all right, so you're now hitting consistently 10,000. Can we move it up to 11,000? And this is one of the reasons why I believe that my weight loss program is one of the best in the nation, because the human factor. So many of my patients already know a lot of this stuff, but it's the human accountability and knowing that they're going to meet with me every month, and they're going to have someone that is going to hold them accountable and then challenge them also if they're not, keeping up on their side of the agreement that they come into with when they become my patient. So there's nothing magical about 10,000. And if you look at the history of where the 10,000 steps a day comes from, it's kind of, it's truly a random number. I was listening to this podcast about a month ago where they were interviewing this PhD, and he was talking about some research that they basically said that it's postulated that our ancestors walked between 15,000 to 20,000 steps a day. Now, I don't know how they came up with that and how accurate that study was. But to me, it makes sense, because before modern era, we didn't work inside. We didn't have all of these, things that make it easy to be sedentary. So for me, I always tell my patients, my goal ultimately is to have it where 15,000 steps a day is kind of your norm, even on rest days. You don't have to be crazy like me, because like yesterday, I literally had a full day of patients, telemedicine patients, and I was on my walking pad all day. I walked after my lunch, so I walked to the beach, and then I walked after my dinner. I ended up having like 30,000 steps. That's not required, but I will tell you that my body feels better when I get over 20,000 steps a day, and I've built up to that. And I do believe that that is one of the main reasons that I have maintained my body composition. And I'm leaner at 44 than I was in high school. So that's the reality of using a powerful tool like an incretin, semaglutide or tirzepatide, in the weight loss journey. Okay. So we talked about the resistance training. We've talked about the protein. We've talked about the NEAT. Now the water drinking. So proactive hydration. I call this proactive hydration because semaglutide, tirzepatide, all of the incretins not only suppress your appetite, but they can suppress your thirst as well. So people that are already terrible water drinkers and don't stay on top of their hydration, they are almost guaranteed to experience the bad nausea and vomiting that you hear from the media. I have patients that are like, oh, I'm a great water drinker. And I will still tell them you have to stay on top of it because the thirst is suppressed. And so if you don't already have that habit you're going to get behind on your dehydration or your hydration level. You will get dehydrated. And that is the number one reason why people get nauseated and potentially throw up from that nausea. Okay. So staying on top of it. I always, show my patients, my habit before I started semaglutide is this 40-ounce Yeti water bottle. I go through it about 3 times a day. The first time I do it, I put electrolytes in it and creatine. The second water bottle, I fill up and I'm done by about noon. So I've had 2/3 of my total water drinking before noon. And then the third time I fill it up, I slowly drink it over the afternoon. That way I'm not up all night peeing. But, 120 ounces is almost a gallon. There's not anything magic about a gallon, but I'll tell you that while I was on semaglutide, that habit that I already had in place really served me so that I didn't really experience any of that nausea. There was a couple of times where I got behind on hydration and I definitely experienced some nausea. But ultimately it's so preventable. So that's my 4th non-negotiable. My 5th non-negotiable has everything to do with data, because how can we change something that we don't track? Okay. And I recognize that the number on the scale can be triggering for a lot of people. And I'm not here to say that, everyone should be getting on the scale on a regular basis, because there's some people with severe eating disorders like anorexia and bulimia that really should work with a therapist or a psychiatrist or both in helping them overcome that. And so I'm not saying that everyone should be getting on the scale on a regular basis, but I will tell you my own experience. This was the first time that I got on the scale on a regular basis. It was almost daily. And I changed my mindset of how I viewed it. I saw it as it was no different than me looking at my sleep score first thing when I woke up in the morning, right? I literally, when I was on semaglutide, I would get up, I would pee. As I'm on the toilet, I would open my sleep score. I would see my sleep score. And then once I'm done peeing, I would get on the scale naked and see what my dry weight was at that time before drinking or, eating anything. And I would see the fluctuations over, the span of a month, because I'm still in my menstruating years. But I also saw that it ebbed and flowed, but trended in the downward way, right? So that way, if it was a certain time of the month and I, was retaining, 2 or 3 pounds of water, it wouldn't affect me because I know that that's going to go down. I know I didn't gain 2 or 3 pounds of fat overnight, right? So knowing data is super important. So the scale is one piece of data. The second piece of data are our measurements. And I have my patients do measurements once a month, because when the scale does slow down, it is really nice psychological boost to look at your measurements and be like, oh, well, I only lost 2 pounds, but I lost 7 inches. Cool. I'm still going in the right direction, right? So I make my patients do measurements once a month. Pictures are crucial. I learned this in my health coaching days. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. I always tell patients, you do not need to show anyone your pictures, but take pictures of yourself weekly. I always tell patients, wear the same thing: black sports bra, black shorts. If you're a dude, just wear, short shorts, and literally take front, side, and back. Type onto the picture week 1, and then put it in your hidden folder on your phone. I know iPhone has, hidden albums so that no one but you can see them. And I tell patients, I don't need to see these pictures. These are for you to see. And I'll warn you, no one likes day 1 pictures, but man, 3 months into it, when you're down, let's say 12 to 15 pounds, and you're feeling like, I haven't done anything, because you still have 30 or 40 more pounds to go. You look back at day 1 picture and you're like, okay, I still have some ways to go, but I definitely have come a far way, right? So pictures are really a powerful tool. My most favorite tool, honestly, is a DEXA scan. Unfortunately, a DEXA scan is not easily accessible to most people. If you live close to a big city, most big cities will have DEXA scans that you can get, just pay out of pocket for. The kind that are paid for by health insurance, that's not what I'm talking about. Women will get these scans for bone mineral density, but oftentimes those scans won't give you the number of % body fat and muscle mass anyway. So I always tell patients, expect to pay out of pocket. Your insurance is not going to pay for this. But getting DEXA scans every quarter is really cool because it's the most accurate way for you to determine that as the scale is going down, is it, how much of that drop is from fat loss versus muscle loss. And remember, the average person going on a diet, trying to lose weight by cutting calories, whether they're on or off a drug like semaglutide, is about 25 to 30% muscle mass loss. So again, I believe that those numbers come from people that aren't doing resistance training, eating protein. So I believe that you can actually maintain, if not gain muscle. And the last DEXA scans that I did January and then I did April. And I showed not only did I not lose muscle, but I actually gained muscle in those last 4 months of me doing semaglutide. So it is possible. But the DEXA scan is the most accurate way. The InBody is the next best. I feel like it's a far next best, but it's better than nothing. And InBody is a lot more, it uses impedance and it's a lot more easily accessible for a lot of people. So, so that is something that I definitely highly recommend. So to sum this up, I'm going to come back in part 2 and answer a lot, because I did an Instagram thing where I said, ask me questions that I can make sure that I cover so that on this episode, it's shareable and it covers all of the bases, whether you are on, this class of drugs for your own weight loss journey and you can't work with me for whatever reason, or someone that is on it and they're not, or you suspect that they're not doing it the right way. I want you to have a couple of episodes to just share in love and kindness and like, hey, look, I don't know if you've heard of this chick before, but I know that she apparently is doing it the right way. And if you're using this, I want to make sure that you do it the right way, because when people are doing it the wrong way, they're losing both fat and muscle, and they're literally dooming themselves to being on semaglutide for the rest of their life if they want to maintain that weight loss. So again, maintaining weight loss is great, but then when you get old and you have no muscle mass, then we're talking about all sorts of other bad things. So that will be discussed in part 2. But I just want to wrap this up by reminding you that if you are a patient in the United States, I'm still not seeing patients outside of the United States. So I'm sorry, my Canadian friends, we're still not at the place where I'm going to take on working with you guys. But if you are interested in my weight loss program, email my staff at info@Larimar Med. Again, that's info@LARIMARMED.com. And just say, hey, I'm interested in getting, the information about the weight loss program, and they will send you information. See if you are someone that qualifies for it, and they will take care of you and go from there. So I appreciate the listen. I appreciate all of the love and support that you guys consistently give me and Melissa on this journey to empowering you on your journey to being the healthiest, happiest, most optimized version of you. And just remember that, at the end of the day, knowledge is power, but really the power comes from the action that you take from that knowledge. So I just challenge you, if you are the listener that listens and takes in all of this stuff, but doesn't do anything with it, I challenge you to have that shift and become a doer instead of just a listener. Okay. So stay tuned for part 2, and I appreciate you so much. Until next time, have a great day.
Wow, we've reached the end, but before we leave you, we'd love to hear from you. After all, it's not every day that someone reaches out and asks for your opinion, and to us, your opinion does matter.
Now, the content in this episode is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition.
Share this episode with anyone you think needs to hear this message. And please remember to do your part of the bargain by rating, reviewing, and subscribing wherever you listen to the Made Fitz show.
We are Melissa and Dr. Fitz. And until next time, thank you for your time, support, and action you take in your own health journey. You get one life. Let's live it abundantly together.